Hey there folks, Joey here with a special movie review of Captain America Civil War, the latest film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The film is the 5th biggest opening weekend of all time as I'm recording this. I've seen the movie twice, I plan to see it again, and I'm just going to flat out say I really thoroughly enjoyed this one. I guess my thing with, let me talk about my feelings on superhero movies in their current state. After 2015, you had Age of Ultron and you had Ant-Man. Ant-Man was a nice little fun diversion, and Age of Ultron, while I did like the movie, was kind of a disappointment, and it left me feeling a little, I guess, superhero fatigued. Plus, Fan 4-Stick in 2015 didn't help either, as it really showed the worst of what the genre can do. And then we saw the release of Batman v Superman, which, if you're a fan of, that's great. I'm not. It was not my kind of movie, and I was severely disappointed despite incredibly low expectations for the movie. And, yeah. So I was not looking forward to Civil War for a little bit because of, Batman v Superman's, big disappointment on me, and I wasn't looking forward to Civil War that much anyway because of the comic storyline. I never read it, but from what I had heard, it's really not something that interests me. The idea of superheroes fighting is not always something I gravitate towards. I feel like they should be fighting supervillains, and especially in the case of Marvel, because, Marvel has a, villain problem, which some would argue continues into this movie. But I found myself thoroughly surprised with this one, I guess because I had fairly, low expectations. I was like, it's going to be a fine movie, and I think there will be some people who will come out of this movie saying that because, the early reviews for this movie were ridiculously positive, in the same way that the early reviews for Batman v Superman were ridiculously negative. So I guess I should just briefly run through what I think of each of the Marvel movies. Iron Man 1, up till this recording, was my favorite of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I love that movie so much. It's probably my favorite superhero origin movie. I'm not saying it's perfect. Obadiah Stane is not the best villain, and as much as I love Jeff Bridges, I just can't take him seriously as a villain. This movie really, I love the special effects in this movie, the action sequences, and just Robert Downey Jr.'s great, performance as Tony Stark. Incredible Hulk. I think this one's kind of underrated, and I think people just sort of lump it with the 2003 one, because back then people were not too familiar with the concept of reboots and all that. I mean, Batman Begins did that, but, you really didn't have too many reboots at the time. And the way that it was made, you could almost see it as a sequel to the 2003 movie. But regardless, I think it's a fun movie, if you just want some dumb action sequences. I like Edward Norton as the Hulk, as Bruce Banner / Hulk, but I'm not sure if he would have worked for the crossovers. I mean, I would have loved to have seen it, but I think Mark Ruffalo really works for the dynamic of the Avengers. So, I guess that takes us to Iron Man 2, which I've tried to watch this movie the last couple of times, and I could only get through an hour or 40 minutes into this movie without turning it off. It kind of bores me, honestly. I really haven't seen this movie in its entirety since its theatrical run back 6 years ago. So it might be one of my least favorite Marvel movies, I think, just for the fact that I just can't get through it. So then you have Thor 1, which I think out of the solo, the non-Iron Man 2s, is the weakest of the Phase 1 movies. And I think Thor 2 is the weakest of the Phase 2 movies. So then we get, Thor, it's okay. I mean, Chris Hemsworth is decent. And, Tom Hiddleston's decent, but Tom Hiddleston comes more into his own as Loki in the future films. And then Captain America First Avenger. At first I thought this movie was just okay, but after watching it a couple times, I think it's kind of grown on me as one of my favorite Marvel movies. I like the period stuff in the movie. The villain is actually really good. The romantic interest is good. I like the action in the movie. I just like the character of Steve Rogers. And yeah, it also kind of is like the movie that sets the standard for how the Captain America movies seem to be the main plot line in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, you know, because it introduces the Tesseract, which would become not introduced, but they kind of have the Tesseract, or they mention it in Thor, if I'm not mistaken. Captain America, you know, they have the Tesseract, and then they go into, you know, the Tesseract storyline goes into Avengers. And Avengers, I remember seeing this movie on the big screen for the first time, and I don't think, as much as there are other Marvel movies that I like more than Avengers, I don't think my viewing of any Marvel movie will ever top this one, unless Marvel gets the rights to Fantastic Four or X-Men. Because this movie was just so much damn fun. And this was another summer where I wasn't really looking forward to any of the superhero movies. The Dark Knight Rises, it didn't look appealing to me, and then I didn't particularly care for the movie. Same thing with Amazing Spider-Man, and then Avengers was my favorite out of the bunch. I was like, okay, this looks cool, and I just really had a great time. But, you know, I will say, it was better seeing it on the theater than it was on the small screen. Iron Man 3. At first I thought this movie was just okay, but I've grown to like the movie a bit more, and if you take this as just another Marvel Cinematic Universe film, you'll hate this movie. If you look at it as a Shane Black Iron Man movie, you'll probably end up liking it more. And it just never made sense to me why people liked Thor: The Dark World more than this one. It's really, from a lot of people, I think it's the Mandarin twist. And there are other legitimate reasons not to like the movie. I'm not saying there aren't, but I feel like that's pretty much like 90% of the complaints, and it's like, come on. And it just makes me tempted to say Mandarin is just the best Marvel villain, because at least it's freaking different from goddamn Malekith or like Whiplash. It's just some of the Marvel villains are really bad. I think people forget about that. And when they think about Mandarin, they're just like, you know, they just think of the twist, and they're just like, oh, that's stupid. It's not like the Mandarin. Anyway, that's enough about Iron Man 3, honestly. I like the movie. And then Thor 2, I liked it the first time, but, like, thinking about it and, like, watching it again, it's, I really am about it. I guess just with Thor in general, it's really hard to create a compelling movie about this character. I mean, the actors are not terrible. Like, Chris Hemsworth does a good job, and Tom Hiddleston as Loki's great, once again, but, you know, it's just one of those things where I wasn't fond of it. But then 2014, I think, was the best year for Marvel so far, with Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Guardians of the Galaxy. Winter Soldier really, I think for a lot of people, is one of the best superhero movies ever. And it's kind of like, people think of The Dark Knight when they think of this movie, because in some ways, Captain America Civil War is not a superhero movie. People like describe it as a political thrill, and I would definitely say it is it's in my top 5 Marvel films. Definitely has some of the better villains, better set pieces, and it's really nice continuation of the Captain America films. Then Guardians of the Galaxy was just a hell of a good time. It's another weird case where I didn't like any of the trailers. People were going wild, and I was like, we'll see what happens. And then I ended up seeing the movie twice in theaters. It's just a blast of a movie. So much fun. And it's one of those cases where it's like, yeah, I like this more than the Avengers. You know, I'm more excited for Guardians 2 than I am for Infinity War 1 and 2, in some ways. Even though Infinity War 1 and 2 is going to be, like, probably a big crossover. Just the idea of Thanos, I just don't care, but Guardians was just a good time. Age of Ultron, I kind of talked about this. It's got too many things going on. It's really one of those movies. It really has a lot going on in it. Ultron, I have mixed feelings on. He's a cool villain. He's one of the better Marvel villains, but, you know, I liked the Death Machine from the cartoons. or comics. Not much I can say about that movie. Ant-Man, I really liked Ant-Man. I was really surprised how much I liked the movie. I think Corey Stoll, he's basically another Obadiah Stane, but I actually liked him a lot because I could take Corey Stoll seriously as a villain. And I liked Michael Douglas in it. Evangeline Lilly is great. Paul Rudd is, of course, great. It's just really funny. And it has the best Stan Lee cameo, in my opinion. So now we get to Civil War, I guess. So this was a really lengthy, getting into Civil War discussion. And I'll try not to... minor spoilers from the movie. Because, I get people don't want to be spoiled. I really dug this one. So basically, this movie takes place, obviously, after Winter Soldier and Age of Ultron, and it works sort of both as an event, equally well as an Avengers sequel and as a Winter Soldier sequel. So basically, Captain America and his buddies on a routine mission, and then casualties happen. And it's sort of somewhat caused by one of the heroes. So this causes the world to panic, and the world, the UN wants to have these things called the Sokovia Accords, which would make, it's kind of like a superhero registration thing where the heroes have to work for the UN, and the UN decides who goes out and fights. Or when they go out and fight. Excuse me. So, then with that, Captain America's like, no, this is wrong. Humans have agendas, and in his own words, the safest hands are still our own. Whereas Tony Stark is of the opposite opinion. He is definitely supporting these accords, and there's definitely a nice little discussion scene where both sides really get to address their points. And while you may not agree with the other side, I presume most of you are watching your Team Captain America, you can at least understand where the other side is coming from. And honestly, Tony Stark's side, while Captain America is the more noble one, Tony Stark's side is the more realistic one and likely to happen. Just think about it. You want... sure, you can say the safest hands are still owned, but Thor going rogue is not a tempting idea. Again, you could say, what are you going to do about Thor? When it's like, well, you can send somebody after him. I mean, Thor's not completely invincible. But anyway, you get where both sides are coming from. And then suddenly a plot happens where the Winter Soldier is framed, and this causes Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther to go after him. And the movie kind of goes off from there with Steve trying to protect Bucky. Yeah, it's another, Bucky movie, which at first I wasn't looking forward to, but after rewatching the two Captain America movies before this, I ended up liking their relationship a lot more, and it makes Civil War a lot better. Now, granted, before I go any further, I just want to say there's an inevitable Batman v Superman, comparison here, because these are both movies where heroes are fighting each other, and you have a villain, kind of behind the scenes type of thing, and, the villain in the trailers he's not really there, but there is a villain in this movie. Not going to mention who, but they do help manipulate the events, and you probably know who the villain is if you know the comics, or, you read these things online, rather, but it's kind of makes you think of Lex Luthor from Batman v Superman, and you got the two heroes on opposing sides, and, it's a darker toned movie. And again, the comparisons are valid, but also invalid, I guess you could say, because Batman v Superman is only the second film of its franchise, and and while I think that movie fumbles the whole premise, I do have to say it at least has the disadvantage of only being only two movies deep, whereas Civil War has 12 movies of characters and plots and developments all behind it. So you have that extensive history of all of those movies backing up your knowledge of these characters. Whereas Batman v Superman, this is the first time we're seeing Batman, Wonder Woman, Lex Luthor, and a ton of other characters. And then, Superman has to have a sequel, so he's there too. Again, that's maybe not exactly the movie's fault, but it's something you have to realize with Marvel, is that Marvel is at such a point where, you can say, well, there is enough development. I mean, there are 12 movies at this point, you know. Um, and then DC could say, well, I don't want to see all those movies. But again, if DC plays their cards right, you're going to get the same thing with DC, where you're going to get eventually a movie where 12 movies of development later, you're going to get a satisfying, maybe not conclusion, but a satisfying treat. You know, this movie sort of acts as like really the Avengers sequel that Age of Ultron wasn't. It's kind of the thing I've been hearing from a lot of movie reviewers, and I really agree because the team sort of comes apart. I really didn't get that impression in Age of Ultron. They're just kind of like, just lost for 2 seconds and they came back. This movie, I just think the action sequences are really well handled. Again, the Russo brothers directed this and Winter Soldier, and I'm really interested to see what they do with Avengers Infinity War. The acting, I also think, is excellent across the board. I just want to mention Vision and Scarlet Witch for a moment because these were characters I did not care about in Age of Ultron, and I care about them a lot more here. And they're used better here, I think. But, of course, Chris Evans is great as Captain America. And Robert Downey Jr. probably gives his best Marvel Cinematic Universe performance since the first Iron Man. He really is this changed man. He still makes quips and all, but you can tell he's got the gray hairs, and he's a bit more mellowed out, and a bit more serious, I guess you could say, at this point. And but his own personal demons are consuming him still, and he still has a lot of problems. So it's really a great development of this character. As for everybody else returning back is of course great in the movie, but I really would just want to mention Chadwick Boseman and Tom Holland as Black Panther and Spider-Man respectively. They really organically add Black Panther to this movie. Black Panther makes me think of Wonder Woman in Batman v Superman, where she feels like a dropped-in plot point. She's sort of there, But Black Panther, I feel, was really a well integrated character. He's a leader of the nation of Wakanda. Well, before his dad gets killed. Anyway, it's kind of his whole motivation in the movie, because the Winter Soldier is blamed for these events. So he goes after the Winter Soldier, thinking the Winter Soldier did this. Do we know? Do we not know? Because the Winter Soldier gets mind controlled and all that. So how do we fully trust him and all? So, but Black Panther, that he was excellent. His fight scenes are great, and Chadwick Boseman does a really great job with this character, and I just can't wait to see the Black Panther movie. Of course, Tom Holland as Spider-Man is the real headline here, because this is the Spider-Man's entrance into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This would be like making a Disney Cinematic Universe without Mickey Mouse, and then suddenly he appears in the 12th movie. Spider-Man is just such an important, integral character to Marvel, and it's so great to see him back. And even people I know who don't like Spider-Man were amused by Spider-Man and really did enjoy his action sequences. And Spider-Man's in a lot more of the movie than I even expected, because I heard 2 scenes. When you tell me 2 scenes, that sounds short to me, but he's also, of course, in that airport fight scene as the trailer showed, and he does a lot in that fight. And speaking of the airport scene, I will say maybe one of the main criticisms is the shift in tone we get to the airport fight scene with Ant-Man and Spider-Man entering, because, they're funnier characters, and they kind of somewhat clash with the overall tone of the movie, but I feel like it's needed, because the movie is so emotionally heavy, and just the fight itself might be the best fight I've seen in a superhero film. And again, usually I'm not for the idea of superheroes fighting each other, but the thing is, these are teams of superheroes fighting each other, and they're like using teamwork to fight against each other. And I think that's where it wins me over. It's like the teamwork element, like that you have in the Avengers films, where these heroes fight together and they use their powers together. There's some great moments, some great scenes. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's just like, people using their powers in a way where it's, it's more creative ways of, punching or beating up people. And not just, punching and beating up people, but also a case of not rescuing people, but like, covering another guy and all that sort of stuff. So, And then the two after credit scenes, I think, are both really, really good. Sorry, this video is a lot longer than I intended to be, but that's my thoughts on the overall Marvel Cinematic Universe so far, and Civil War. Overall, I can understand if people don't like Civil War, but for me, Civil War is my favorite of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films thus far, and it's really the closest I've seen, at least for that airport fight scene, to a comic book movie coming to a Saturday morning cartoon feel. So that's it for now, guys. I'll see you later.